We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Paring Down podcast. Today I'm talking to author Laura Carlin all about that ripple effect of decluttering and how it affects our lives on a much greater level than we really anticipate when we're just starting to get rid of our stuff. Now, we do lean into parenthood today. I want to give you that heads up in case you're not a parent or you don't feel like you can relate to that kind of thing. However, I do want to say that so much of what we do say about the ripple effects of decluttering on our family life and our parenthood can really apply to anything, really, to any stage of life that you're in. So I do encourage you to still listen to today. And I think you're going to get a lot of nuggets from this podcast that's just going to really make you think like, could some of the things that I'm not so happy with in my life really be related back down to something as simple as having a bad morning because I misplaced my keys? You know, there's some really interesting tidbits here that I'm really excited to share with all of you, parents or not. However, I do just want to give you a heads up because it's your life and you should be able to choose to listen to what you want to listen to. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about Laura Carlin. So, Laura is the co-founder of InspiredEverydayLiving.com, which is an online resource for creating a life that you love through the process of creating a home that you love. She's the co-author of the books Decluttering for Parents, Create Space for More Joy, Love, and Connection, as well as the book Declutter and Manifest, a 52-week workbook to create a home and life that you love. Her passion for decluttering and organizing began when she was just 9 years old. For the past 20 years, she's been providing tips, inspiration, and step-by-step guidance to her community for how to make simple changes in your home to create positive change in your life. She has appeared in the Washington Post, The Today Show, KTLA, Goop, Traditional Home, C Magazine, and The Hollywood Reporter. And now the Paring Down podcast. Hey! Okay, so Laura holds her master's in spiritual psychology, a bachelor's in communication from Northwest University, and is a simplicity parenting coach. She lives with her husband and their 2 sons in Los Angeles and Sun Valley, Idaho. All right, you guys are ready for this? Let's do it. Laura, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm so excited to talk to you because as a fellow writer, I feel like as writers, we have so much in our souls that we need to get out. So I know this is going to be a great conversation.
That is so true. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. Okay. Well, you tell everybody a little bit more about who you are and what you do to kick this off.
Sure. So I'm Laura Forbes Carlin, and I help people make simple changes in their home to create positive change in their lives. So whether you're looking to improve your career, your finances, your relationships, or bring more joy or peace or love into your home and life, I believe you can do that by making changes in your home. And certainly decluttering and organization are probably the biggest changes you can make to have that impact in your life.
I know that the people listening to this couldn't agree more, whether they are there and they're kind of in that maintenance stage and enjoying those, the good byproduct of a decluttered home, or if that's something that they want. So this is really, really exciting. And you have 2 books that you just released with your sister, which is so cool. Would you tell us a little bit about both? We're going to focus on one today as a teaser for everyone, but I'd love for everyone to kind of hear what your expertise is in.
Sure. So Decluttering for Parents is one of our books. And both Alice and I are parents. I have a senior in college and a senior in high school. So I'm kind of, on that end of it. And Allison has a 9-year-old and a 20-year-old stepson. And I also have 2 stepsons who are older, who are 33 and 36. So we're parents. And so we were inspired to write this book. I think it's particularly geared towards parents of, more in the early years, early teens and younger, because we realize how challenging, how wonderful, but also how challenging that time of life can be, and how what tends to often get in the way most of really being able to enjoy that time and be present for it is the clutter. So that is the decluttering for parents. And then we also recently wrote Declutter and Manifest, which brings in other aspects of our work, which is that idea that you can really use your home as this medium for transformation to create the life that you dream of. So that as you're creating this home you love, you're also creating a life you love. And that brings in other elements in addition to decluttering or organizing, like intention, inner clutter clearing, life design, furniture arrangement, all the different ways that you can support your thoughts, feelings, and actions to support what your goals are.
It's so cool how it all works together, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you experience it, it's really wild. You're like, how does this hold so much power? Just our
I know.
environment and our house, you know? But it's exciting because there are a lot of things in life we cannot control, but we can control our homes and what it looks like and all of that. So, yeah, I had a hard time choosing. You know, you and I know, chatted about kind of choosing which book maybe we should focus on for today. And both of them I was so excited about. But we are going to talk about parents today because I have a 3, 4, and 6-year-old. And so selfishly, this conversation
so
feels
you're really in it.
That's right. That is correct. So let's dive into kind of this decluttering world for parents. I love how you said at the beginning that you really focus on these smaller tweaks, simpler ways to incorporate decluttering and organization into your home so that it doesn't feel overwhelming. Because as parents, especially as moms, we have enough on our plate already. So to approach something in an overwhelming way just is not going to work. So why do you think it is important for parents in particular to celebrate small successes when we're decluttering?
Well, I think you really nailed it. It's because parents are already stretched thin and busy and often overwhelmed. And if you have an infant, maybe sleep deprived. And so it's just not realistic to think that you can set aside these large blocks of time for decluttering, or that you can go about decluttering in a way where you take everything out of every kitchen drawer or kitchen cabinet, and then you're still supposed to, feed your family throughout the day. And so parents really have to work in small chunks of time. And I think that is, you really can get results from that. And I think it's so important to celebrate those wins, whether it's 15 minutes a day or you clear out, one drawer or one item, it feels good. Even one drawer feels good. One item feels good. And I think I'm a huge proponent of doing something rather than nothing, because every day you do nothing, that clutter builds, that overwhelm builds, that stress builds. But every day you do something, you feel better and you gain momentum. And, if you even think about just removing one item from your home per day, that's 365 less pieces of clutter in your home at the end of the year. And so to, just really take it one step at a time and then acknowledge yourself for that step.
Acknowledge yourself for that step. Yes. Instead of being critical and being like, I wish I should have done more. I wish I had more time to do, even more piles or get through X, Y, and Z. But to say, hey, today I decluttered the children's, silverware that they don't use baby spoons anymore. And I got rid of those. Like, that is a win in itself, and I love that approach. So what are your thoughts on how the choices we make surrounding clutter and organization in our homes really ripple out into these desired patterns we want to see in our parenthood?
So I really believe that especially with young children, because so much of our life revolves around the home and it revolves around these very repetitive tasks, bath time, homework time, dinner time, all of that. And in each of these moments, there's the potential to be present, be at your best, and have these moments filled with some ease and grace and joy, or it can be really frustrating and overwhelming. And I think the difference is often, is my home working for or against me? And certainly clutter and organization play a piece in that. So, if you're at the changing table, the diaper's already off and you go and reach for the new diaper and it's not there, it just makes that moment chaotic. Or, whatever the distractions might be at dinner time where, it's hard, keeping kids at the table, keeping teenagers at the table, whatever it may be. And then, that's not happening the way you want it to. And that can ripple out and affect your relationships. And so I really see that how we arrange our homes, whether we have this clutter-free organized environment, whether we set things up to support us, really can be the difference between having consistent sit-down healthy meals, which, then affects our health. Oftentimes I use this example of trying to get out the door in the morning, because we've all had that, where we can't find something like the car keys or homework or soccer uniform, whatever it is. And the later it gets, the more stressed out everybody is. Maybe we snap at our spouse, we're like rush our kids out the door, and then we feel badly dropping them off. We get to work late, that annoys a coworker. Well, you can see how over time, something as simple as not having the designated place for the homework or car keys or whatever it is can affect our relationships, can affect our career, which could affect our finances. It kind of goes on. But the good news is that the reverse of that is also true. So we make one simple change, like having that designated place for the car keys, and then that ripples out in a positive way.
Wow, what a great visual, even because we all know that experience. And it's so true. It doesn't stop with, all right, now we've got the keys finally and we're in the car, because now you're on edge, like you said, and then you've snapped at your husband. And so then you need to try and repair with him, and he goes to work and, he's distracted or whatever it is. Like you said, it has this really huge ripple effect, all coming down to organization and clutter in your home. And I love that you said that about kids too, because like you said, I mean, so much of what we do and how we show up as parents is within the home. And I think to back it out, instead of saying, I want to declutter my house because I'm tired of the mess, you can back it out and say, what do I want my parenthood to look like? Like, I want to have patience with my kids because they need patience. They're going to test your nerves. They are children. You know what I mean? And so I want to have patience with my kids. I want to be able to have energy for them. I want to have fun. And then take that and ripple it in and see, okay, how do I make sure that the starting point of my home, like you said, is really laying a foundation for those parenting principles? Wow. I really, really love that. And so what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say that I loved how that's one of the big things that we do is we tie it into that intention, is looking at that larger purpose and the larger goals. And that's why we have the people, we start with working, what is my life vision? What is my ideal home and life? And then backing it up from there. And then that also makes sort of that day-to-day of parenting that can sometimes feel like, oh my God, the dishes again, what's the point of this? There is a point, exactly as you said. The point is, more peace, more connection in my family. And so it can really help to tie it to those larger values.
Yes, to give purpose to those little things is so important. Otherwise, like you said, it just sucks our energy and we get resentful that we always have to do laundry, right? We're like, laundry's never done because you're always wearing some clothes. Right. So there's going to be more to wash, Right. But like you said, what does that really mean? Well, if we're continuing keeping up on top of laundry, that means that we're getting out and enjoying life, because we do need to cover our bodies in public, So like you're out there enjoying life, and to see that positivity associated with the task at hand is so beautiful. And this kind of ties in really well with the concept that I loved in your book, in Decluttering for Parents, about how everything is alive. So can you explain what that means and how specifically children tend to engage with objects in this way?
Sure. So a teacher of mine, Tara Catherine Collins, who wrote a book called The Western Guide to Feng Shui, she talked about these three principles: everything is alive, everything is connected, and everything is changing. So this idea that everything alive means that everything in our homes, even the objects that we considered inanimate, the books, the photos, the desk, the chair, they're alive. They're molecularly alive, made up of moving atoms. They have their own unique energy. And then they're alive in the thoughts and the feelings and the memories that they trigger. So all of these things are either lifting us up, bringing us down, or they're kind of neutral. So the goal is, as you said earlier, in our homes, we have control, not always out in the world. So the goal is, in our homes, we want everything to lift us up. We want to be surrounded by things we love, living in love, things that make our heart sing. And so this is, to me, the heart of decluttering. When we're engaging with these items and we're determining, like, is this loved and useful? Am I going to keep it or let it go? We want to be tuning into the aliveness of this object. We want to see, okay, what is it sparking? What thoughts, what memories, what feelings? If it's negative, it's probably time to let it go. And we can also tune into our bodies, because invariably when we love something, we take a deep breath, we stand taller. And when we don't love something, we feel sort of a pulling and nagging and sinking sensation. Now, children, we can see this with them because they sort of naturally give life to objects. Their stuff is very alive for them. And so we can kind of look to them for cues for, oh, wow, look how they're affected by the things in their home. Look how they communicate. Look how they play. And we can sort of, think about them as we go about our decluttering and engage with things and determine how an object's aliveness is affecting us.
Totally. It kind of plays on this concept that has gotten a lot of heat because anytime something gets popular, it gets heat. And that is Marie Kondo's idea of sparking joy, right? I think that kind of, to me, embodies the idea of something being alive because it feels relational. We know how it makes us feel, like you said. And there is power in using that as we declutter and as we interact with our stuff. I think that's, so many people, oh, well, you can't just declutter something that doesn't spark joy. It might be practical. Yes. Okay. We get that. You have to keep a spatula and that might not like spark joy for you.
Yeah.
But there are so many things that we interact with that do have a very emotional relationship and emotional reactivity within us, right? I think about our clothes. What do you feel good when you pick up to put on your body? And what do you see hanging in your closet that makes you feel bad about yourself, And kids are so much better at knowing what sparks joy. I think this is why so many kids do struggle with decluttering, because in their little hearts, they've attached a certain aliveness to their belongings, like it makes them feel comforted and safe, and they play with things a certain way. And I actually think that's a really, really beautiful thing. And I've noticed that my kids do that more, actually, the less we have. So it's like a good thing and a bad thing. It makes it harder for them to declutter their things when they have less because they've gotten more attached to it, which is a good thing. That's what we want. We want them to play with it. I've used this example before. My daughter, the only thing in her room, the only toy is her Barbie dream house. And if she had a lot of options in her room, I'm sure she would never play with that Barbie dream house. But because it's her only option, she has made worlds with her little Barbies, and she's included her stuffed animals. And she, that's like her whole little setup in there. And it's so special to her because it's alive. She's interacting with it in such an intentional way. So I think that's a really cool concept. And, with that, I was speaking of kids having a hard time getting rid of things. Part of that is because they change so much. They're getting older. They grow out of things. We are constantly having to reevaluate. And so a principle that you mention in your book is everything is changing. What are you talking about with that, and why is that so important to keep in mind?
Yeah, so these atoms that make up everything are in constant motion. So everything, it's kind of a universal truth, right? Everything is in motion, everything is changing, and we see this so much with kids. They crawl, they walk, they start talking, their growth and development is so rapid. And in terms of our homes, we want our homes to be reflecting and supporting where we are in each moment in time. And again, that's pretty obvious with kids. We're going to move them from a crib to a toddler bed or a bed, and so forth. It's not always as obvious with us, but we also have to keep that in mind for ourselves, that we also are growing and changing. So the things we loved 10 years ago, 10 months ago, 10 days ago may not be the things that we love now. And they may not be the things that support our current goals, that current, ideal vision for our lives right now. And again, this also ties into this idea of empowering ourselves in our homes so that we can be present for all of this, kind of repetitive tasks in everyday living. So for example, we want to meet our children where they are. Like, are they at a stage where they can start putting their toys away? How can we make that easy for them? We can have containers with open bins. Maybe they're ready to brush their teeth at night on their own, so we need a stool. All these things. Maybe we put snacks at hand so they can get their own snacks, or help set the table. All of these things we can kind of match where they are in each new moment in time to support them and support our goals.
Yeah, everything is alive and everything is changing. I feel like our two big takeaways that are really powerful. They're powerful notions because we think that, we declutter once and we're good to go. And having kids definitely teaches you that's not the case, because they are obviously changing. But like you said, to see how that applies to our own life matters as well. I mean, a year ago, I didn't have this podcast. Right? Like my life looks completely different. We are constantly changing. As women, we change sizes in our bodies. Or maybe we have different relationships that have come into our lives, different hobbies. We're involved with different things. And that, like you said, we have to then set up our home in a way that reflects those new things coming into our lives. And, you know, I think about how our mudroom, I've had to change out our baskets. We have these 4 baskets, and one has goggles and sunscreen and that kind of thing. And another has our tote bags for the grocery store. Another one has our hats. And then the other one used to have soccer gear in it, because we would be running out the door. And I didn't want to be like, where's your shin guards? Where's your soccer socks? Where's your soccer shoes? Right? Like where's your little soccer ball? All of that fit into this one bin. That was great. Soccer bin. Well, soccer ended like 3 months ago. My kids they're not going to be the next David Beckham. Okay. I think that ship has sailed. You never know. But I'm not sure we're going to be a soccer family. My kids were out there picking dandelions, and they were like, it's too hot to run around.
So great.
So I haven't actually decided what that bin's going to be, right? But you have to adjust, and you have to change what makes sense in your space. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that your systems didn't work or that you failed. It just means you're alive, that this is part of life, is that you just have to adjust.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And because also of that constant rapid development with kids and that change and that growth, we really want to anticipate that. That's one of the keys to staying clutter free with kids, because, you know, if we don't have a plan in place, and again, your plans can change, they need to adjust to wherever you are. But the most important thing is like, just pick a plan. You can always like change it later, and chances are it will change later, as you said, because the kids have already changed. But we want to anticipate that growth. And you know, for example, like if we're at the changing table and we've kind of struggled to get on that onesie and we realize it's not fitting, if we don't have a plan for where that's going, are we donating it? Are we saving it for a future, you know, for a sibling or another child? It will invariably go back in the laundry basket or right back in the drawer. And that's how the clutter, you know, that's how it starts. So the more we can kind of anticipate that change and have a plan for it, the more we support ourselves in being clutter free.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You read my mind from, I just recorded an episode that's not out yet. It will be by the time you and I release this. So for listeners, this is from a couple episodes ago, but basically I always really encourage people to make decisions ahead of time, because you're going to be busy, like you said, when you're folding that onesie that doesn't fit anymore. And then you don't want to have to do the mental gymnastics of figuring out what to do with it. So it's just easier to like throw it back in the crowd. You know what I mean? But if you make these decisions ahead of time, like you said, you're anticipating it, then that clutter can't creep back into your home. And that's huge. If you're new around here, I have just a wee bit of anxiety, but sometimes that anxiety is warranted, because there are things in this world that can make us sick or hurt us. And one of those things, unfortunately, is the air we breathe. I know it's dramatic, but it's also not. Listen, Americans take about 20,000 breaths per day, and we spend an average of 90% of our time indoors. Now, of course, I recommend getting outside, all of those good things. However, at the end of the day, we are no longer a people of hunter-gatherers, for the most part. So we need to consider the air we're breathing inside. And indoor air, realistically, can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air, according to the EPA. And those indoor air pollutants can cause respiratory symptoms like sneezing, congestion, scratchy throat, and even more serious health problems like lung and heart disease. So what do we do other than panic? Well, listen, my family now uses the Air Doctor, and I want to tell you all about it. So the Air Doctor is an air purifier that filters out 99.99% of dangerous contaminants, so your lungs don't have to. We're talking allergens, pollen, pet dander. You hear me, you allergy people? Pet dander, dust mites, mold spores, and even bacteria and viruses. When you head to airdoctorpro.com and use the promo code PAIRING, you're going to receive, drumroll please, up to $300 off your air purifier. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So listen, if you don't love it, just send it back for a refund minus the shipping. But here's some more good news. The exclusive podcast customers, that's you guys, will also receive a free 3-year warranty on any unit, which is an additional $84 value. So lock in this special offer, your $300 off your 3-year warranty by going to airdoctorpro.com. That's AIRDOCTOR. So you're spelling out the word doctor, PRO.com. And use the promo code pairing, PARING. Remember, it's not like a pair of socks, it's like a paring knife. So there's no I in pair. PARING. One more time for my people in the back. That's airdoctorpro.com. Use the promo code pairing for $300 off and 3-year warranty on your new Air Doctor air purifier. Now, something that is a challenge with kids, particularly because I kind of mentioned how they do like to hold on to things. They're little hoarders, these kiddos. So how do clutter and organization play into boundaries that we hold as parents that really kind of benefit this child-parent relationship?
So I like to look at the home as pretty much a reflection and consciousness. Our homes reflect our beliefs. And so, for example, let's say that you have in a bed, because this is very common, like let's say you have an adult bedroom and, there's toys all over the bedroom. There's photographs of the kids and family members. You want to take a look at that and say, is this supportive for sleep and or my relationship with my partner? And you can kind of see how, and it's what I love about the home is these patterns. It's very obvious when someone points it out to you, but it's often very hard to see for ourselves. But the second it's pointed out, it's like, oh, wait, here's this bedroom, with the kids' photographs and the toys. Like, is that really going to support, having a romantic moment? Chances are not. And is that also a reflection of because it's hard enough, I think, as parents to focus on our relationship when we have children. And so when you look at that, you're like, okay, that is sort of a metaphor for what's going on here. And so then you can start establishing boundaries. And it's not that your children can never play in your bedroom. That can be very practical for you if you're trying to get dressed and keep ready and they're young, you want to keep an eye on them. But it's that at the end of the day, there's this intention of okay, now the toys go back to where they belong. Or maybe, the family photographs are better in a different part of the home. And you can kind of establish a boundary that way.
That's so great because when I think of boundaries and kid stuff, right, we think about maybe how much they can keep and that's important, but also the boundary of when your home is organized and working for you, it's a self boundary for all the other areas in your life, because with kids, like you said, we start to meld into each other. And then that's when we don't have an identity outside of parenthood. And I know there's different opinions on that. I would say that motherhood, being a mom, is of course a huge part of my identity, but I think when parents start feeling lost and exhausted within that identity is when they aren't holding those boundaries. So by decluttering, you aren't allowing as much in the home that can spread out into different rooms, right? But you're also keeping it organized in a way that allows you to show up for those different pieces of you as a wife, as somebody who, I don't know, for me, I love doing my job and podcasting, right? And if I was trying to trip over kid stuff and deal with kid stuff while I'm in my podcast studio and trying to, focus on that, that's really, really challenging. So I love that you talk about that, about boundaries for our own mental health as parents, because it's far too easy to let those fall.
Yeah, I think you gave such amazing examples there. And I think it was what you also said was, it's very individual. This is about always tuning into what are my values? What are my priorities right now? And at some stages in our life, it's appropriate. When you have an infant, that's all it is, but at other stages, as you said, it's wait a second, I need to bring in some balance for self-care or for my work or for my relationship. And then again, it's kind of working the home to support you in achieving those goals.
Totally. Well, and I was thinking too, we have the parent-child relationship, but that's a little different than the family unit as a whole, right? And So for us, part of our routines and our boundaries is that we don't leave toys and mess on the kitchen table. Our kids
Mm-hmm.
use the kitchen table for crafts and arts and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing, but it doesn't stay out because otherwise we wouldn't have our family dinners together. And
Yeah.
so that's a boundary right there to say, hey, I love that you're so creative. Maybe let's find a
Mm-hmm.
way to move this if you're not done with it yet. We can
Mm-hmm.
move it to your room. We often do projects on big cookie sheets so that they are movable.
Mm-hmm.
That's our boundary because what's most important to us is being able to have family time together at night at the dinner table. So it's just a great connection. I don't think I've ever made that connection before.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for that. When it comes to kids stuff, why is it so important not to over organize our kids stuff?
Okay, so before we even get to that, and I think probably a lot of people have heard this now about decluttering, but one thing to be really mindful of is to make sure that you declutter before you organize. And that is so important because you will just waste time, energy, and money because clutter by its nature cannot be organized. We like to say that clutter in a pretty basket is still clutter. And also, if we don't declutter first, we end up wasting money because we think we need all of these containers and boxes and bins. We might think we need new shelves or a new piece of furniture, a new room, or even a new house. And so, oftentimes when we declutter, we realize, clutter-free drawers often inherently organized. We realize we have more space than we need. We realize we can repurpose bins. So even before getting to organizing, just make sure that, the decluttering is done first. And then the reason I advise not over organizing with kids is because in general, for most people, I just don't think it's very sustainable or realistic for parent and for the child. And again, everything's individual. If you are one of these people that just naturally can, likes to and has the time and you love having your books alphabetized or your Legos color coordinated, then, by all means, this is about like living how we want to live. But I think for most of us that can feel like too much. And it can actually be where the organizing becomes clutter, whether the system becomes clutter, mental clutter, or there's too many containers and the containers become clutter. I think that's what we want to be aware of. And when it comes to our kids, I think for them, especially developmentally, like they're just not in a place to organize like that because they don't think like that. Going back to what we talked about before, for them, automobiles and I don't know, stuffed animals or, all this stuff becomes one in their play. And sometimes trucks are not a truck in their imaginations. And so we want to kind of encourage that imagination and like not kind of expect them to be putting in these sort of boundaries that may not exist in their minds. We just want to make it easy for them to put things away.
That's so beautiful to think about, isn't it? Like they are just so creative and they don't have all of these walls that are up and that make everything feel so literal, to us as
Mm-hmm.
adults. And it's fun to look at things through their eyes, like you said. And that reminds me, even my oldest, I've shared this on here before. He is not my organized child.
Mm-hmm.
He does not ever want to clean his room, right? And I have to make sure that that's not a punishment for him because I don't want to, create any of those issues as he gets
Mm-hmm.
older. However, I have to be careful too that when I say, hey, bud, can you clean your room? He doesn't want to. I say, hey, we have to do that, but
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't take you long. It'll probably only take you 5 minutes because you don't have much stuff in there, right? This is why we donate and we keep your room decluttered, but I don't want to be stepping on Legos when I'm coming to kiss you goodnight. So I need you to clean that up. So he goes and, begrudgingly goes and does it. And then I walk in there, and if I criticize him and say, oh, well, why'd you put this over here? It's supposed to
Mm-hmm.
go over here. Then
Mm-hmm.
that's really going to make him never want to clean up and never want to organize. Right. And so I think there's power in letting our kids have the power,
Mm-hmm.
and say, it's okay if you macro organize or if you put things together that I wouldn't put together. And every
Mm-hmm.
once in a while, I will go in and do a little bit more of micro organizing to put all of his stuffies back in one basket,
Mm-hmm.
make sure all that his Legos are like out of his crayon box, you know what I mean? So that I can hopefully help him play because then things do get a little bit messy. And I think as parents, especially of little kids, it's okay to go do those resets once in a while, but it doesn't have to be perfect every time it gets done, especially if the kids are the ones doing it,
I think
which is so great.
I think that's exactly right. And there's also a practical element to having, like with like organized, because, we, going back to this giving things, things that are alive, is that we think about, well, how does this item want to be stored? And a stuffed animal doesn't necessarily want to be against something sharp where, and not only can things get dirty on a practical level, but there's sort of an energetic piece that happens. And so I'm not saying it's definitely fine, like you said, to have these resets, but also to your point, it's more important that our kids enjoy this tidying versus making it so complicated that they give up.
Exactly. And we can do that to ourselves too. I had a girlfriend message me, like she DM'd and she was just like, do you ever feel like you're just running around after your kids, like trying to clean up, right? Like when you're in one room cleaning up, they make a mess in the other room. Oh my gosh, I have the best example of this. We were leaving to evacuate for the hurricane 2 weeks ago. And I'm just trying to pack up the car, right? And my kids were home from school because the schools were closed before we left. And my husband's at work. So I'm trying to get everything ready to go by myself. And it was comical, right? Like I would run out to the car with a bag. I came back in. My 3-year-old had found I thought was empty laundry detergent thing that I hadn't brought into the garage yet. I just put it in the mud room so I can transfer it to the trash can, and poured remaining laundry detergent all over the floor. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. Then I grab a towel. And while I'm cleaning that up, my daughter had grabbed a cup in the kitchen and filled it with beads and water and paint, and then started painting our dining room table with that. She's 4. And
Oh
I was
my
just
gosh.
like, it was, I mean, truly, right? You sometimes feel like
Right.
you can't possibly put all the fires out fast enough,
Yes.
But that situation was a little different because we did have to, evacuate and get out the door. But generally speaking, I told my friend, I was like, no, actually, I don't feel like I'm chasing them around all the time, because the goal isn't to have a perfectly tidy space 24/7. You know what I
No.
mean? Like, that's okay. So I'd love if you could share what you would advise to any parents who get too caught up in keeping their home with kids perfectly in order.
So I would advise having that clarity about that larger life vision and intention, I think is so important. And, I feel very strongly that decluttering is not about perfection. It is about freedom. The higher goal of decluttering is so that we can live life more fully, so we can focus on the things that really matter to us. And so if you find yourself in that mindset, and I know that I definitely can get in that mindset, and I've had clients who are in that mindset where they can't relax because the toys are out, or they, say, I don't even want to cook in my kitchen because I don't want to mess it up. And, the thing is, like, that's not living fully. That's not living freely. And so my advice is to really turn your attention. First of all, my advice is to kind of get curious versus judgmental. I think our tendency is to judge ourselves. And when we look at that stuff that's out, oftentimes it isn't clutter. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's just these loved and useful items that we've left out. And sometimes underneath that is a more important value for that moment. Like, well, you know what? I didn't clean up because I needed a nap, or I didn't clean up because I wanted to get some work done, or my child was sick and I decided to snuggle in bed versus clean up the house. And so sometimes we should or we had a lot of fun. And, and we want to look at that so we can be less judgmental and kind of look for that higher value underneath it. And then the other thing is to get out of this perfectionism, is to focus on appreciation. And you mentioned the life-changing magic of tidying up earlier. So Marie Kondo's big epiphany that she described in that book, she described pretty much having like a nervous breakdown from decluttering, because she kept focusing on what can I get rid of? What can I get rid of? And when she collapsed on the floor, the voice said, focus on what to keep. And so that is, I think, very profound, which is we at some point, like, yes, it is freeing and wonderful to get rid of the things that are no longer loved and used and create that space. But then we need to turn our attention to, what have I kept, and what, and how much do I love this stuff, and how can I appreciate it? And, for the useful things, it is more on that spectrum, of appreciation. For the beautiful and cherished items, it really can be on that end of the spectrum of love. And so it's just keep turning our attention to, wow, look at all the things that I appreciate about my home. And I even suggest sometimes doing an exercise with that, which is really simple, which is just when you get up in the morning, before even getting out of bed, just taking a moment to look around and just spot things that you appreciate. Maybe it's my bed's so comfortable, my sheets are soft, I love the way the light hits the wall. And that's how we can build this more, loving relationship with our homes.
That higher value it feeds into that gratitude, right? Like I am immediately thinking of my living room's kind of a mess right now. Because I didn't have time to do my normal nightly reset. Well, I shouldn't say that. I did have time. I was really tired last night and I didn't do our nightly reset. And this morning has been hectic crazy with work. I work from home, but most mornings I try and do a reset if I haven't done it the night before. I'm more of a morning person, but I didn't do that today. And so there's like papers that my first grader was working on. The marker bag is like kind of half spilled up onto the couch. I'm like, it's going to roll into a cushion, right? Like it's a little bit stressful. And then I look at it though, what's the higher value there?
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, my kids didn't watch TV after school. They came in and they worked on their fun little workbooks and their coloring, and they got really creative with what they were working on. My 4 and 6-year-old were doing something together. I don't really know, inside one of his workbooks, and so this is proof of life. It's proof of something that is good. And I have to see it that way instead of like, oh, it's stressing me out. Like, of course, a reset is important. We've talked about that. But like you said, seeing the higher value takes that stress out of it and says it's okay that it's not perfect all the time. I'm so grateful that my kids were doing their homework or doing whatever they were doing yesterday.
That is exactly it. And because otherwise it can be just as restrictive. If we're in that judgment all the time, that can be just as restrictive as clutter, as living in a house that's too cluttered.
We don't want that pendulum to swing so far in the other direction that it's not helpful,
Exactly.
That, like you said, because clutter is keeping us from our freedom. And then perfectionism is keeping us from our freedom.
Right.
Both of those things have the same result. We've got to find the point in the middle that feels really good.
I had my older son was one of those like super tuned in kids. And because I definitely had a tendency to be a little too extreme early on in my process. And I remember him saying one day, he goes, Mommy, I have my book on the coffee table. He goes, but that's normal, right? Like we should be able to have our books on the coffee table. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've clearly gone a little too far.
That's so funny. Oh, kids, they're so cute. They put things in perspective, don't they?
Yes, definitely.
I love it. Well, actually, the last question I had for you, or thing I was hoping you would share that I really loved in your book, kind of tracks back a little bit to when we were talking about including the kids in the process. And we talked about them, cleaning up and those kinds of boundaries. But how do you approach including your kids in the decluttering process based on what age they are?
So I was inspired by a dear friend of mine and mentor, Kim John Payne. I don't know if you've read his book, Simplicity Parenting. It's amazing. Read it.
Okay. I'll put that one on my list.
It might have been his second book, but he uses this idea of Governor Gardner Guide as an approach to discipline. And I sort of adapted that to an approach to when and how to involve children in decluttering, because I think it's really important to acknowledge where they are developmentally and what they're capable of. And I know one of the things I was really guilty of as a parent was just giving my children too many choices. And just like, studies have shown too much stuff is overwhelming for children, too many choices can be really overwhelming for children. And so in general, the idea is that in the ages, of about birth to around like 6, 7, 8, it's the governor stage. So you're just in charge. And certainly this is really easy, like with an infant, like, their clutter is your clutter, right? It's all you in those early years. And I had a little bit of a hard time with this, like around 4, 5, and 6. And this is not to say that you don't take into account their feelings. Like as you're taking care of their world, of course you're tuning into, do they love this? Are they still using this? And I allow myself and recommend to clients, I think it's so much more important in decluttering to keep moving and not be perfectionistic. So for that reason, like I suggest an opaque, bin that you keep. If you're not sure about an item, you can take it out of the rotation and put it in there. And then if they haven't, remembered it in however amount of time, then you can let it go. So I'm completely fine with that. So in that governor phase, it's really up to you, but of course you're tuning into what you think is best for them. And then around, 9 to 13, you're in the gardener stage, which is that you're still tending to the garden, and ultimately the decision is going to be yours, but you're involving them. So you're involving them in the decluttering process and things that they might be ready to let go of and so forth. And then in the teenage, like 13 and above, you're the guide. And so with teenagers, the most important thing, honestly, is to inspire by example, because with a teenager, they're not going to have a buy-in if we're not practicing what we preach. And then the other thing with teenagers that can be helpful is to have some level of like attaching clutter-free to something that's important to them. Like just how we've been talking about attaching decluttering to our values. You can kind of do that for teenagers and say, well, the more organized your room is, the faster you get out to hang out with your friends or, play baseball, like whatever it is, or, clean desk, clear mind, like studies have shown that really helps with, with your schoolwork, that type of thing, attaching it to things that are meaningful for them.
Yeah, I just love how clear that is, because as parents, we're like, how do I include them and what's the right thing to do? And, am I being a bad parent if I lay down the law and all of that? And so to have this governor, gardener, guide approach kind of makes it, I guess it gives you permission to kind of approach it a certain way depending on their age, and it's a gradual thing, right? Like it makes sense when you think about it. Like you mentioned, kids don't do well, especially in that younger age from 0 to 8, with having too many decisions. And so we can say, well, I want to give them the power, I want to empower them to make these decisions about what they're decluttering, but that's not big picture probably even helping them all that much, because it's so overwhelming for them, like from a developmental standpoint, like you said. So it's okay to say, hey, we're going to be getting rid of toys if they don't fit into this bin, so you can help me choose which ones fit, but ultimately, like, we're going to get rid of this because it's too much for the house. And to put your foot down there isn't harming them, it's actually taking that pressure off of them to make decisions they're not ready to make and old enough to make. And then in the gardener, of course, this is now developing, right, where they have a little bit more of the frontal lobe to make these kinds of decisions, and so you're preparing them for the guide stage, for when you are not in charge, so to speak, of them anymore. So I just think that's a beautiful approach, and I just so grateful that you shared that with us. So,
and also just to clarify a little bit on that, there's also a difference between decluttering and organization. So and tidying. So decluttering is that choosing what to keep and what to let go of. And that's where those developmental guidelines really apply, so that they're not overwhelmed. So you can really take care of it for them when they're younger. But then in terms of even organization, where things have a home, that's choosing the things you've chosen to keep, where are you going to store them? That's still really more within our realm. But the putting things away, that tidying aspect, that's something we can involve our children with early on.
Oh, totally. Totally. Even my son, who doesn't like to clean and tidy or declutter, none of the three, he's really satisfied when he does it. He's like, Mom, you want to come see my room?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, the room that you just spent 20 minutes throwing an absolute conniption fit about cleaning? Yes, I would love to come see it, So they know it feels really good. But that is a great distinction, yes, that the governor, gardener, guide approach is really about helping them let go of those items, but that the tidying can be an expectation from a very young age. What's that song? Well, when we were little, it was the clean up, everybody,
right.
everywhere. There's a new cleanup song that my kids play all the time. I'm like, what is this 21st
really?
century
I didn't know
song?
That changed.
They changed it.
Oh, gosh.
They changed everything. Gosh, my first grader has like real homework now. And I'm like, what is this math? Like, I feel so old, because I remember my parents being like, this is not how they taught it to us. And now I'm like, you're doing doubles plus 1, like 10 plus 10 plus 1 is 21. Like it's 10 plus 11, but I don't know, like they're new approaches. It's funny. Okie dokie. Well, let's dive into the last 2 questions, which I ask everyone who is on the podcast. And the first is, what is something that you are currently paring down?
Okay, so what I am paring down, this is just something that's very fresh for me, but I'm paring down on the expectation that I should, when I have a goal, that I should kind of know all the steps, that I should sort of know how to get there. And I'm paring down to this idea that my job is really only to kind of listen and tune in to what the next step is. And it's funny because I feel like I read this, I think it was Glennon Doyle Melton in one of her books years ago, this idea of like, I think she said it, like I tune, and I have to look this up because I just started thinking about this in the last few days. And she's like, I think she said, I need to tune in and then, take the next right step. So
That's a beautiful
my thing
paring
right
down
now.
answer. Yes. Paring down your thought processes. That's deep and I love it. Okay. And what is something that you are looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to a hike today because we have the most beautiful fall weather right now. The leaves are changing. It's still warm, and I'm looking forward to a hike.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I loved hiking when we lived in Alaska. And that was one of the saddest things about moving here to Florida is that there's not really anywhere to hike. And also, especially with my kids, everything's near a body of water that could have an alligator in it. I'm like, I would rather come across a bear on a hike than an alligator, So anyways, I'm very
not
jealous.
sure I'd take either. We have bears out right now. I don't think I would like either.
Oh my gosh. I was on a hike once in Alaska and it wasn't even like a remote hike. I mean, it was around this lake that everybody went around and I had the stroller at the time with 2 babies in it and my toddler. And I looked to the right and through a clearing were like 3 bears. It was a low tide and there was like this creek and they were going for it. And I was like, well, I'm just going to pretend they're not there. I mean, in all fairness, you probably you're on the mainland, right? There's brown bears, which are scary. We just had black bears. I was like, they're more interested in my trash.
We have black bears here too. But for us, it's really moose is more what we worry about running into.
Yes, they are so aggressive, which funny enough, in Alaska, everyone was like, oh, you have to deal with moose and grizzly bear. And I'm like, fun fact, we lived on an island. So the moose couldn't get to us and the grizzlies couldn't get to us.
How great.
The worst animal we had there was a wolf, but that was more dangerous for the dogs than it was for us, and then like mountain goats. So anywho, that's fun. Enjoy your hike today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, before I forget, where can everyone find you? How can they follow along? Where can they buy your book? All that good stuff.
Sure. So you can go to inspiredeverydayliving.com. And from there, you can find our Instagram and our books and our course and everything else. And a free class.
So much good stuff. A free class, you said?
Yes. We offer a free recorded decluttering class that you can sign up for.
Okay, awesome. I will get all of that linked in the show notes for everyone. And thank you so much, Laura, for being here.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.